What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. If you watched my video last week, then you are well aware that this is part 2 of my 3-part series on sexism in photography. Last week, I put an ask out on a Facebook group to local models, seeing if they'd be interested in coming forward and telling their stories with sexism and gendered harassment in the industry. I had 5 models come forward, interviewed 2 of them, and got 3 anonymous testimonials from other models, and shared them with you in last week's video. This week's video is going to be a little bit different. It's maybe a little bit more cathartic for me as a female photographer in the industry. I'm going to be sharing with you some of my experiences with sexism and gendered harassment while on the job. My idea behind this video was that it would be a little bit more of a story time video. I really like watching other YouTubers' story times, so I thought I'd do one myself. And I've been a photographer for about 2.5 years, and about 2 years ago, I started keeping a Word document, just detailing every single time a man harassed me during a shoot, or my model, or just interrupted a shoot in some way. So it's gonna be a fun story time. It's gonna be a little bit cathartic for me. I'm really excited to finally talk about some of these stories. I know the people in my life have definitely already heard most of them, but what you haven't heard yet, if you know me, is all of them in one place. The reason why I say every time a man has come up to me is not because I don't detail the times women have come up to me, but it's because a woman has never come up to me and harassed me during a shoot. Not a single time. Like, I've had 3 women, and I can remember each occasion. 3 women say something to my model during a shoot, and it's always some version of, "Looking great, hun," or "Killing it," something like that, you know? And that's very nice. And when men do that, I don't write it down on this Word document that I have, because that's not harassment, really. I mean, maybe some photographers think that it is, and, like, power to those photographers if they think that that's harassment. Like, you know, everybody defines it differently, and everybody interprets their own experiences differently, so, like, whatever. But in my experience, I don't consider that harassment, and so I'm not going to be telling you about things like that, like, looking good, that's nice shots, whatever. I'm not interested in telling you, like, harmless stuff like that. No, what I'm going to be telling you, and what I've written down on my Word document, is abuse, sexism, out-and-out sexism, inappropriate behavior, creepy comments, staring. You'll get a kind of feel for it as I tell you some of these stories. For the purposes of your viewing pleasure, I have broken up these stories into 2 main categories. So the first category is men just saying inappropriate things or otherwise interrupting the shoot, general harassment, if you will. And the second category is men directing my model or me, or trying to give unsolicited advice when it comes to photography, or just generally acting like because they had a camera one time, or maybe didn't, then they know how to do photography better than me, actively with a camera doing a shoot. So both are obnoxious in their own way. The first category, I think, is explicitly gendered, and the second category, I think, is more nuanced in terms of how it's gendered, because honestly, and you know what, male photographers, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that it happens very often that a random man off the street goes up to another man doing a photo shoot and tries to give him advice. You know, it probably does happen once or twice, but this happens to me pretty constantly, so I think that's pretty gendered, and you'd have a hard time convincing me otherwise, to be honest. That said, I am really interested to hear from some male photographers, so if you're a male photographer, especially one in Vancouver, and you're watching this, leave your experiences down in the comments and just let me know how they compare to the ones that I'm going to be relating in this story. Does this happen to you as often as it happens to me? If not, how often does it happen to you? I'm honestly curious. I really want to know, so let me know down in the comments. Okay, so without further ado, let's dive right in. The first time this ever happened to me, I was downtown and shooting outside of a really fancy restaurant. I think it was like the Keg on Robson Street or around there. And we were shooting up. There was like this kind of walkway area with some really nice bamboo and city lights and everything. And there's some guys, some businessmen standing out front who are like smoking cigarettes or something. But they look fancy. They're all wearing suits and like everything. And one of the guys is just like fascinated with us. Like us taking pictures is the most fascinating thing that has ever happened to him. And this is a recurring issue, is just men will stop and just watch you like a freaking TV. Like you're just a television putting on a show just for their entertainment. That's a whole other thing. You'll see that in the rest of these ones. But this guy is just like the entire time. And finally, he comes up and he's like, "Can I be in your photos?" And of course, I don't know what to say to that, right? And my model doesn't know what to say to that. And so neither of us really react. And then he hops in there and starts putting his arm around the model. And I have the photo. It's just the most awkward photo. The model's just like still trying to do her thing, like still trying to look hot. How do you react to this random ass guy who's just grabbed you? And the fact that he actually posed, so I got like documentary evidence of this happening, was mind blowing. The second time this happened to me, I was downtown with a model, and she's really, really beautiful, and one of my best friends. And again, just drunk men just standing there, just watching us like a freaking TV. And I'm just trying to get this shoot out because there's a really cool background. I think the lighting conditions were really cool or something. And I'm like, okay, I want this spot. I want it now. We're just going to put up with this for like 15 minutes or 10 minutes or however long it takes us to get this shot. And then they start talking to us, right? And one of them's like, hey, smile, hun. And, so she smiles, like, impulsively, right? It's hard not to just act on impulse when somebody strange is telling you to do something. You're like, oh, okay. And then he says, why don't I take a picture of the two of you? And I'm like, no thanks. I actually don't want you touching my camera. And he's like, I give cameras like that away for nothing. And I was like, well, then you better get one for yourself because I'm not giving you mine. This is another one kind of in the same area. I was shooting with a really cool alternative model. And a guy walks by and he's like, is that a guy or a girl? If it's a girl, she's ugly. She's not ugly, by the way. So this one was a little bit more recent. I was out shooting with a 17-year-old model and her mother. This guy is commenting about, she's like, oh, you're a knockout. How old are you? She looks at him like, I'm 17, because she's a teenager, a child. So he looks at her mom and he's like, ugh, did you look like that when you were her age? So this one was also recent. I was shooting downtown, doing a little bit of street photography, kind of waiting by a pole, kind of waiting for somebody to walk by, I don't know, see what they're going to happen. There's like a cool setup. And there's a guy busking beside me, and slowly, okay, I can notice out of the corner of my eye, he's like looking at me, and then he's like looking at me, and then he's like staring at me. Now he's just watching me, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave soon. And I'm just getting ready to leave, and he's like, all that money you spent on that camera. And this guy's busking with like a big amp and a guitar and a lot of expensive equipment, a microphone stand, a guitar case. And I'm like, yeah, it probably costs as much as your guitar. And he was like, Then he goes back to busking. I'm like, another one, when I was downtown doing street photography, I was, again, standing by a pole just kind of watching. And all of a sudden, right beside me, this is during the pandemic, right beside me, like here, there's a guy. And he's like, you picked a hell of a place to stand. And my heart just like jumped into my throat because you don't expect someone to be like literally like not even a foot away from you. And I whip around and he's like, that's my bike. And I was standing on a pole that his bike was locked to. Okay, another one from when I was doing street photography. I was taking like a little video clip of the Vancouver Art Gallery because I was doing my video on best places to shoot in Vancouver. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. But let's take a little video clip of the Vancouver Art Gallery, and this guy comes up to me. He's like, so did you get any good pictures on the phone? And I was just like, no. And I just like walked away because like, what? Why are you even watching me taking video on my phone, and why do you care enough to like say something to me about it? Like, who are you? I think the thing that really stuck with me about that one is that, like, if I'm gonna be taking pictures of anything in Vancouver, it's probably gonna be, like, the iconic landmark building, right? Like, I don't feel like that's unusual for people to be standing in front of the art gallery taking pictures of it on their phone. Like, maybe I'm wrong, but I know I'm not wrong. He's just an asshole. Here's, like, a small aside before I get into more street photography stories, but when you look up street photography on YouTube, it's literally all white men. Like, every single street photographer on YouTube who has any kind of, like, view count is a white man. And, you know, you kind of wonder why that is until you get out there and you do street photography as, like, a tiny woman, and you're like, oh, that's why. Because getting harassed when you're with a model, you have someone to commiserate with. But getting harassed when you're on your own is scary. So, anyway, I bought mace. Another street photography story from kind of the same area. These are all kind of on the Granville Strip except for the art gallery one. But I was downtown on Boxing Day, taking some street photos, doing my thing, and this guy comes up and just starts talking to me about my tripod. And honestly, the number of guys who used to do photography and, like, use that as an excuse to talk to me while I'm doing photography is insane. And that I'm not talking about, like, nice other photographers who, like, with cameras, like, actively photographers now, like, you know, sharing tips. I love that. I absolutely love that. I love talking to other photographers on the street. I'm talking about people who, like, at some obscure, vague point in the past have done photography and, like, have maybe one or two things that they remember about it, and so they want to talk to me about those things, as though that'll help me in some way. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the next group of stories. Anyway, so this guy comes up to me, starts talking to me about my tripod. Oh, I used to have one of those. It was heavy enough it could knock you out, but ha ha ha, they don't make ones like that anymore. Okay, that's creepy. He's like, you look normal, not like these other people. I'm like, okay, great way to lead a conversation. He doesn't have a mask on, by the way. Then he goes into a story about how he's American, and it turns out he's just trying to get money from me, but he's American, and he needs to get back to the airport to catch a flight. And I'm like, a maskless American is talking to me during a pandemic. Like, you think I'm going to give you anything? You think I'm going to get, like, continue this conversation? No thanks, dude. Another one from a separate street photography outing. This doesn't happen every time I do street photography, by the way. It's way more common when I have a model, but it does happen when I'm on my own. I'm out taking architectural shots, kind of looking up at buildings, corners, windows, kind of, just looking around, being really conscious of the world around me. And there's a guy, he's watching me. I can tell he's watching me, but I really like the area that I'm shooting in. I'm just like, whatever, I'll just deal with it. It's the water off a duck's back. And finally he's like, I figured it out. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you're a tourist. Now, the thing that makes this so funny is that I had my tripod under my arm, I had my camera bag, I had my reflector because I had just come from a shoot. So I had tripod, camera bag, camera, reflector. He's like, tourist. Another guy on the bus. And I have the same kit, right? Camera bag, reflector, tripod, camera. I don't know how to make it any more clear to y'all that I'm a photographer. This guy's like, oh, you a photographer? I'm like, yeah, actually. He's like, oh, cool, you professional? I'm like, this is a couple years ago. I'm like, not yet, but I would really like to become professional. He's like, oh, well, I mean, how hard can it be? It's just point and quick, right? And I was like, I think it's a bit harder than that. He's like, nope, that's all it is. Oh, well, in that case, yeah, I guess I'll be a professional right now. I've had a few shoots that I call twofers, and some threefers, and that's where multiple men will come up on different occasions throughout the shoot to say different things about the shoot. So this was a twofer. I was shooting near these prisms, like this prism exhibit thing. It was a really cool light show with a 15-year-old, and she's a lovely model. She's amazing what she does. Her posing's really good, beautiful face, beautiful attitude. But I'm not going to make her look sexy because she's a 15-year-old, and so I'm going to pose her in age-appropriate ways, make her look really pretty, really stylish. I think that's what I'm going for with the shoot. So there's this guy watching us, and again, he's just watching us like a TV. He's standing there with his arms crossed, just like chilling out, not even smoking, not even pretending to do anything else. And finally he's just like, you should get her to pose, turn her like this way so you can see her waist a bit better. And I'm like, thanks, but I got it. And like, at this point, I've had this happen to me enough that I'm just like, you know what, I don't need your opinion. And he's like, well, I'm just saying, just trying to help. And then he continues standing there to like see if I'm taking his advice or not. Like, oh, sorry sir, you're right. What this high schooler's poses were missing was the male gaze. Same shoot. We had to kind of leave that area because there's prisms on both sides of the street and this guy's on this side of the street. So I'm like, let's just go over there. No reason, unrelated, let's go over there. So we go over there. And there's another guy staring at us. And I'm getting a little bit pissed off. I'm like, can I help you? And he's like, are you guys a photographer and a model? And I'm like, yep. And he's like, I feel like I'm in the presence of royalty. So he stands there and continues to stare. And I'm like, well, can I help you with anything? And he's like, oh, no. And then, to be fair, he did then leave, which, thank you, guy, for leaving. Another one from recently is I'm walking towards our next photo location with my model. She's dressed up, she's looking fly. We run into this guy and he's just like, hey, can I be your boyfriend? No, sir, you can move along. Another one, and at this point, like about a year ago, I guess, whenever I took models downtown or like anywhere that there's a populated area, I would say to them like, look, I get at least one man, and I call it like some kind of rule, because at least one man every single time we shoot will say something. And sometimes it's just like oh, you look nice, and those are fine. And sometimes it's something really rude, and so we don't know. And so I'm with one of my friends who's just started modeling, and I'm like, okay, so just so you know, like, you look really nice, so we're gonna get some guys saying something. It might be a nice thing, it might be a rude thing, I don't know, but be prepared for it. On the same block! We are not even a block away. I have just told her this, like 2 minutes ago. And we walk by this anti-mask protest. And this anti-masker guy is like suddenly behind us, and he's like a big tall guy, right? And he's like talking about that we're acidifying our bodies by wearing masks or whatever the hell, like some crazy stuff, right? And I'm like, dude, and I tell him, like, I was just telling my model that every single time I'm downtown, some random guy will come up to me and say some bullshit. And today, you're that guy, so congratulations. And like, I'm over it at this point, right? Like, I'm really mad about this. And he's like, well, that's terrible that happens. But you know what? Still, like, you can't listen to the dog. And he starts going off again. And I'm like, now you're self-aware about what you're doing. You know you're that guy. You know it's terrible that you're that guy. But you just cannot help yourself. And my model actually just lost it. She's like, I hope you get COVID. I don't hope that anyone gets COVID, but if somebody's gonna get COVID, it probably should be an anti-masker, because, like, screw them. And screw that guy in particular. Okay, so the next couple happen in Chinatown, which is a location that I just recently started shooting in, and it's honestly, it is like the cruel mistress of all cruel mistress locations because it's got some amazing neon lights, it's got amazing historical architecture, it's a really, really unique part of town, and it is where the harassment has been the worst by far. If you are a female photographer, or even like a small male photographer, like bring mace, bring a knife, bring a whistle if you're going there, because honestly, like even at like 5:30, like the sun hasn't even set yet, and it is just nonstop, like nonstop. So I haven't written down every single time that somebody has said something rude to me there, because it's just, it literally, like, everybody who passes you on the street has something to say, but I've written down some of the more egregious ones. The first one that I ever got was shooting with a model. She's wearing a dress. It's a long dress. And I've got her doing this pose that requires her to, like, lean back like this, and, like, she'll go, like, 1, 2, 3, lean back, 1, 2, 3, lean back, so that I can kind of get her in, like, this falling motion with the dress, kind of like a guy and his friend walk by and he's like, "You're wearing white panties. I can see your panties. Little white panties." Same day, I'm showing my model the camera screen, so she's beside me. We're both in masks. She's just seeing some of the photos of what we've taken so far so you can get an idea of what she's looking like, all that. And then I hear behind us, like, really close, there's in, like, this low male voice. And I whip around, and there's a dude right here, like, right over our shoulders, looking at the pictures like, "Yep, looks good." Was he wearing a mask? No, of course he wasn't. And my camera screen is tiny, by the way. It's like this big. Like, in order for you to see that, you gotta be real close behind me. These guys have, like, no concept of personal space, but they do have audacity. Same spot, different day, different set of women that I'm shooting with. This was by far the most aggressive and scariest case of harassment that I've ever experienced. There's this guy, he's talking in another language on his phone, so I'm, like, kind of ignoring him. He's on a bike. I honestly thought he was, like, a food delivery driver because he had, like, a squarish backpack. And I'm thinking he's like looking around, and then he's like kind of looking at us a lot, but like not really staring quite yet, like looking like maybe he's just looking for an address, like to drop off a food delivery. I legitimately thought that's what he was doing. And then he starts just shouting at us, like, and you know, he's behind me, I'm shooting, so my model can see him. And I see her like looking at him more and more. And then she whispers, she's like, "I'm gonna kill this guy." And I'm like, "What?" And then just as she says that, he's like, "Bitches!" I'm like, oh my god. Like, she's like, "Don't worry, I got mace." And I'm like, okay, like, let's just ignore him. I've got 2 models, right? So I feel like I'm being flanked kind of by these tall Amazonian women. Like, okay, and you know, I'm pretty powerful. I can defend myself. We got mace. We got muscle. We're good, right? And so I'm just like, just ignore him. You know what? If he gets violent, like, we'll address it. And so he circles the block on his bike, and like, he's kind of circling and circling. And then the next time around, he's like, "Suck my dick! Suck my fat dick!" Charming encounter, really, 10 out of 10. It was that week that I bought the mace. Because as soon as she said, "I've got mace," I just had like this instant wave of jealousy, like, I want mace? You mean you're gonna get to pepper spray this guy and I won't? So, that is all of the stories that I have for the first part, which is general harassment. I've got many more stories for the second part, which is photography-related harassment. Men coming out to us, telling my model how to pose, me how to shoot, or otherwise just giving completely unsolicited advice as to how we should be conducting the shoot. Okay, so men trying to help me with lighting is remarkably common. I have a selfie stick light. I already mentioned it in the previous video, and there's just something about that like attracts attention. I don't know why. I think the selfie sticks have like the same kind of cultural connotation as Twilight. Like, it's something that teenage girls use, and therefore it's bad somehow, even if it's like got professional lighting attached to it. I don't know. I don't get it. But so I've had guys comment like, "Oh, is that a selfie stick?" And I'm like, "Yep." And he's like, "Pretty girl holding a selfie stick." I'm like, yeah, it's not taking selfies, I'm the photographer. I've got this one light object, this thing. And so a flashlight attaches to this, and so at one point I've got the selfie stick in one hand, and I've got the light object, and I'm pointing it, like when you point it at someone's face, it makes like a really interesting pattern over their eyes. So I'm like pointing it exactly at her eye, and I've got the selfie stick here. No, she's holding the selfie stick, and I've got this, and I'm taking the picture. And this guy comes up, and he's like, oh, can I help you hold the light? Like, do you need help? I'm like, you know, he's a nice guy. Like, I wouldn't call this, like, harassment necessarily, but I just can't imagine it happening to a man, so I thought I would include it. And I was like, "No, I'm okay, thanks." And he's like, Are you sure? I'm like, "Yeah, I'm okay, but thank you." Like, you see somebody with professional equipment, and you just immediately assume that they need help with it because they don't know how to use their own professional equipment. A lot of these kinds of ones happen downtown. You know, I'll be shooting by a shop window. I had a guy come by one time, and I'm shooting like a silhouette, so I've got like this interesting thing in front of the lens, and then the person silhouetted, and I've got her making like these interesting poses that kind of bring out the silhouette. And he's like, "Yeah, that backlight's a bitch, hey?" I'm like, "No," because I'm doing a silhouette. Like, If I didn't want a silhouette, I wouldn't be shooting with this much backlight in the pitch black. Another one at the same window, actually, and I'm shooting with the window here. The model's kind of looking at the camera, and she's up against the camera here. I might be able to find the photos. And a guy comes by, and he's like, hey, don't you need flash for that? And I'm like, actually, no, there's enough light in the camera. Like, you don't need a flash for every photo that's in the dark. I didn't say that, but I probably should have. And then he starts interrogating us about our photography experience. He's like, oh, are you guys professionals? And I'm like, yep. He's like, how long have you been in the business? And I'm like, about 2 years, 3 years. He's like, who do you work for? And I'm like, myself. And, and a stock website, because I sell a lot of my photos on iStock. I know I don't work for the stock website, but I just wanted this guy to leave me alone. And he's like, oh, you sell stocks? I'm like, no, not that kind of stock. He's like, do you have GME? I'm like, oh my God. So he starts talking to me about GameStop, and this guy's just striking up a full-blown conversation, and it's like, yeah, no, you're not interrupting anything. And like, he was a nice guy, he was a friendly guy, but it was still just like, come on, dude, like, I really just want to keep doing this shoot. It's really cold out, it's dark out. Like, I want to get this shoot done with. Can you please not? Like, another one, actually, during that same shoot, it was another twofer. Actually, this is a threefer, because this was the same, right after the shoot, I had the guy with the tripod thing come up to me, like the American with no mask, so this was a threefer for me, but a twofer for the model. And we're shooting by my favorite neon light, which I have mentioned countless times. It is by La Cantina on, I believe, Nelson Street, Nelson and Granville. Amazing taco shop, 10 out of 10. And the neon light is also 10 out of 10. So I'm shooting there. It's probably about 7:30 at this point. And I think it was like a Friday night or something. So it's a crowded taco shop. And I understand that shooting does draw attention. So if there are people staring at me, like, you know what? That's just part of doing photography in an outdoor environment. Like, we're in public, we're gonna get public attention. But this guy is just staring. And he is like full slack job, like drinking his beer, like staring at us through the window. And, my model's starting to get a little bit uncomfortable, and I'm like, we can wrap it up. She's like, oh my God, he's coming. And so he comes outside, he's got his beer, he's so pissed drunk. He's like slurring around like, hey, I like to do photography. And we're like, yeah. And he's like, oh, you've got like an 80s look. And like, she doesn't have an 80s look, but she's got like these big glasses on, like to reflect the neon light, which is a cool look. He's like, you gotta like really embody the 80s, like really, really 80s rock, like, And he like starts throwing out some names of like rock stars from the 80s. And he's like, yeah, give me some of that, like lay it on there. You really gotta like, and he just keeps going. And it's like, dude, come on, please, like, this is the last location of the shoot. We're almost done. We already had to deal with the freaking GameStop guy. Like, please. And I'm just like, okay, yeah, I get it. He's like, no, okay, take the picture. And so she's like, she just poses. And I'm just like waiting for him to leave. I'm like, yeah, okay, bye. And he won't leave. He's like, yeah, take the picture. So I like bring the camera up and I start taking pictures of him. He's like, no, not of me. And I'm like, well, who do you want me to take a picture of? He's like, take a picture of her. I was like, oh, I was doing that, yeah. And he just won't go away. And he's like, okay, fine, you can get one picture of me. You get one picture. So anyway, here's the picture. Asshole. So we just had to pack up and walk away. I don't think he even went back inside. I think he just stayed outside, hanging out at the doorframe, like drinking his beer and watching us. And if not, then he did go in back inside, but he was still like just drinking his beer, watching us. By the way, his own girlfriend was at the table with him. So she's sitting there, and her date has just completely abandoned her to go and harass some photographers. Like, should have swiped left on that guy, honey. Okay, so this one was actually on the same occasion as, it was a threefer night, on the same occasion as the guy was commenting on my model's supposedly white panties, which is just disgusting, but right after that, she's still doing poses, and this guy comes up, and this is also pretty scary, I guess. He says, hey, put your hair over, like, she's got her hair like this, right? He's like, put your hair over your shoulders, both shoulders. And she's like, oh, like this, and she does this. And he's like, no, both shoulders. And she's like, he's like, here, let me help you. And he like starts advancing on her with his hands like this. And this is like in the middle of the night, like, no, it's like 6:30, but it's pitch black out, right? And I'm like, okay, hey, like, I got it. And like, she's got like this look of terror in her eyes, like, understandably so. And he's like, no, don't worry, it's okay, I used to do this. Like, homie, I'm doing this now. I didn't used to do this. I'm actively doing this, and you're interrupting. And I'm like, thanks, but I have a vision for this shoot, and I'm gonna do the vision. He's like, oh, you got a vision. Okay, cool. And he like left. But don't try and touch strangers. Don't try to like touch strangers' hair, especially. Oh my God. Of course, I am like apologizing to her. I'm like, oh my God. Like, and this is the first time that I had shot in Chinatown with a model. I was like, I didn't really know what to expect, and I didn't really know to prime her on what to expect, and so I felt really bad. This was either the same shoot or another shoot right after that. I did like 3 shoots in Chinatown in the same week, but it was one of them. This guy comes up and he starts trying to tell her how to pose, and he's like giving different poses. He's like, here, do the umpire pose, like this, like this. And I'm like, thanks. He's like, no, try it. I'm like, we're really okay. Like, he's like, no, here, or this one's a good one too. And he like does some other poses. I'm like, you know what, dude, like, I know how I want her to pose, and she's posing like that, so that's good. And he's like, oh, okay, cool. And then he like wanders off, but he's like standing at the like end of the block now, just kind of like watching us and like nodding. Like, I think I really hate it when I see men doing that, like, oh yeah, nodding in approval, as though I, for some reason, need the approval of some random man on the street who supposedly used to do photography. Howdy. Okay, editing Yvonne here. I'm going through this video right now and I realized that there's actually a clip that didn't import. So my last story that I have for you is a guy, so I got the selfie stick light and I'm standing by a neon window. This is also in Chinatown, or a neon light. And this neon light is at, I think, Georgia and Maine, or like around there. It's a really good one, go check it out. But it's like a bright, kind of white blue, like bluey white light. It's really bright. And so I have my model holding a selfie stick down so that she has a dark blue light coming up at her, and then she's got this like white light coming down at her. So I was really trying to get that like duotone lighting right. And this guy comes by and he says, oh, no, actually, you want to hold it up more like this. Here, you want to have her hold it up more like this. And then he grabs the selfie stick and, like, tries to lift it. And, like, I grab it out of his hand. And I'm just like, thanks, actually, but I've got it. And he's just like, okay, I was just trying to help. And then he, like, stalks off. And, like, it's just extremely frustrating. You have to use this tone of voice that reminds these guys of their ex-girlfriends or of a woman who at some point in their life has told them no, because as soon as you invoke that voice, they are like out of the trying to help mode, because they're not actually trying to help you, right? Like, they're trying to start up a conversation or like get friendly with you. They don't actually care about how your shoot's going. If they cared about how their shoot's going, they would never interrupt it in the first place. So you just have to like immediately just embody the ex-girlfriend who left them for probably a completely legitimate reason. So that's all the stories that I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. I know I really enjoyed filming it. I honestly really enjoy telling stories. Like I said, I really wanted to get all of these stories off my chest. I had a lot to say about each one, so sorry if this story time was a little bit long, but honestly I'm not sorry, because this is just that life as a female photographer. These are all of the experiences that I've had in the last 2 years. It happens not every shoot, but like just about every shoot. Every shoot that I have a model downtown will get somebody saying something. Maybe 30% of the time when I'm out on my own doing street photography, I'll get somebody saying something. So it feels constant. And some places like Chinatown, like you guys saw, it literally is constant. It's just like deflecting a barrage of just tiny arrows flicking you in the face all the time. Some of them are obnoxious, some of them are inappropriate, weirdly sexual, some of them are just unwanted, unsolicited advice type of thing. Some of them are outright aggressive, as you guys saw, but overall, just on the whole, it's just annoying, and it just feels like something extra that female photographers and models have to deal with. That's not to say that male photographers don't get spoken to on the streets, or maybe even harassed on the streets sometimes, I don't know, but like I said, I honestly cannot imagine that it happens nearly as often as it happens to me, a female photographer. And all of these stories have been from street harassment. I didn't touch on sexism in the industry because that's what I'm going to be talking about next week. I'm going to be talking about all of the sexism and gendered barriers that female photographers face in the industry, rising in the industry, in hiring decisions and things like that. So stay tuned for that. I know these aren't particularly fun topics, but they are important topics and they are very interesting to talk about and hopefully interesting to learn about. So thank you for watching this video. Thank you for listening to me kind of ramble about all of these. Again, it was very cathartic to get this off of my chest. And if you really liked this video, don't forget to leave a like, leave me a comment down in the comment section. If you want to subscribe to my channel for more content like this, please do. That would be excellent. I put a lot of work into my videos, as you can maybe tell. And regardless of whether you are subscribed or not, don't forget to stay sharp and keep shooting.